microphone. All right, how we doing? I always dance to that music. It's still going in the background over here. How are you, everybody? My name is Danielle Padula, Executive Director here at the Broadway Theater League of Utica. I am so excited to welcome a great friend of mine, a mentor, an entrepreneur herself, a go-getter, a bad kicking butt mom, and Miss Mollie Mann is here with us today. So, Mollie, thank you so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And we'll get into, meeting more about Mollie and some questions, but really quick, thank you once again for joining us on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Quick subscriber update. Your invoices are on their way. You should have received them electronically already, and you can start paying on your subscription. You will still be getting something in the mail shortly, so be on the lookout for that. And new subscribers, you could start saving your seating section with a deposit on your account. Just give us a call at 315-624-9444 and we'll save your seat and your spot in line. So let's get right to it. Mollie, we are so thankful to have you with us today. I know I've already said that before. Mollie is with Bond Theatrical Group. And Mollie, why don't you give us a quick background about yourself?
First of all, I'm loving being here. I feel like for all of us, having been sitting in our house, it's so nice to connect this way and to see your face, but also to know that, we're reaching your audience and your patrons. So that's great. A little bit about myself. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, and actually is where we're broadcasting today. But I am a partner at Bond Theatrical. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, primarily as a booking agent. So have sort of seen it all over these last 20 years. And, really, I got my start at the Orpheum Theater in Memphis, Tennessee. Originally, I thought that I was going to be interested in the live music space. So sort of started to go down that road and ended up on the Broadway side. And it's really been everything and more I could have hoped it would be.
Well, we're thankful that you landed on that side because you have been a pleasure to work with and you have really helped me in the last year of my career. So I just want to thank you personally and both professionally for just always being there for the Broadway Theater League of Utica, for our community, our patrons, and our team here. So we're thankful you took the road of Broadway, and we wish you were closer to us, but Tennessee's great, so we understand.
No, it is. It's funny because, we talk to each other so much, but we don't get to see each other that much. So it's funny how much, in our business, so much about it is relationship and being able to call someone and get advice. And, what we're finding, especially the seat that I sit in, is that, we deal with 350 markets all over the U.S. We deal with really small markets that might be in rural communities that are lucky enough to have a theater and a series and a Broadway series, to major markets, to San Francisco, to Chicago and Boston. And oftentimes you'll see that while the market's different and every building and every market is very specific, there's so many times that you can learn, one side can learn from the other. And it's an interesting perspective to have because we're able to see what some other markets may be doing, and that you and I, Danielle, can then talk and say, well, what about implementing this sort of promotion or this type of programming or this, just different things that we can try. And so it's really been fun to explore that.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just finishing my thought.
Yeah, well, when we were in New York together, I know you even mentioned other theaters that were similar into our size or our population and really helped us connect with other markets. So that's been a great tool. And then, especially in the marketing side of it and keeping the brand the same and the show strong and, very just comparable to other markets. So I think that's probably one of the coolest things for me in this newer role was to have other theaters that you were able to connect us with who would maybe be looking at the same subscription size or pricing and things like that, because there are so many variables that go into our pricing schedule, our population, our community, our sponsors and supporters. So I love the marketing piece of that and just the connection that your team is able to offer us as far as saying a city did this or a region did that and things like, different things like that. Even though everybody's so different, we share so many of the same things. So that has been a really strong, talent that your team has able to help us with. And I think we lean on each other a lot, even from the booking side of things and the marketing side of things and everything in between. So I know it keeps your job interesting trying to remember all those 300 markets and who did what, but we seem to manage.
It is a funny sort of icebreaker that I can do at cocktail parties when oftentimes I will meet somebody when they tell me they're from, oftentimes someone will say, oh, I'm from a small town in Georgia. And I say, tell me what town it is. And then they'll tell me, and oftentimes I can name the theater. And they think it's really impressive that I know the theater in their town. But it's a nice icebreaker for people when you get to know them. But yes, it's weird the things that I now know as far as how many theater names and markets that are out there.
Yeah, well, we appreciate all of that. So why don't you tell our audience just a little bit about a typical day in the life of Mollie? I know me and you tend to share our calls now due to COVID from home and between kids' appointments and things like that. But as we get into more of a routine and the country starts to open back up a little bit, what is a typical day like for you? And then how has COVID made maybe some challenges?
How it's turned everything upside down. So it's interesting that you brought up marketing and booking, and it's interesting how often those two come together. For a long time, I worked at an agency that was strictly booking, and it became very clear that marketing and booking really needed to work in tandem because so much of what we do as far as the shows that we represent and putting the puzzle together, meaning lining up each date that each market that all root together. So much of that on the sales side is really getting the show out there, letting buyers, and by that I mean presenters and people at theaters that are going to then be booking the show, how they can understand the show. They can bring in their local marketing teams to understand what assets are going to be available for that show. Oftentimes we hear from different theaters that while we may know the show, what tools will we have to then let our audiences know the show and want to come and see the show and understand why that show is so special. So at Bond, we have both a booking and a marketing side, and we often work together to make sure that the shows that we'll be bringing out also have great marketing materials, meaning anything from video that people can log in to a website or see on television to see what the show looks like, to print materials that you can see in a magazine or see, pick up a brochure when you're in the theater to see what the show is going to be like. So a lot of what we do, I can sort of talk you through our process because what's funny is every day is a little different. So what we do is when we have a show that we know we're going to bring out, we kind of first things first is talk internally and assess what is that show going to need specifically so that we can help put that show out there in a way that people can really want to see it and understand it. So I'll take two examples. So one of the shows that we are working on and we're so excited to debut in Utica is An Officer and a Gentleman. This is a brand new musical. It originated on the West End in London and is coming over, but is completely reconceived. So it's based on obviously a movie that many people know, but nobody has seen this stage production. So we knew starting out we needed to have really strong materials. So we spoke internally. We had a whole timeline. We had our marketing side and our booking side come together to create those materials so that we could go out and let theaters know what the show was about. We usually start about a year and a half to 2 years before a show will hit a theater. We'll start this process. So this was 2 falls ago, 2018, we started talking about the Officer and a Gentleman materials and the project. So once we develop those, then this is when I pick up the phone and I call Danielle and I tell her how great this new production is going to be and show her the materials that we've developed. And she, and I'm not the only one doing this. So, it's funny. I think about how many shows each theater is, how the challenge probably on your side in understanding the creative teams and which shows and the quality, what's going to be the quality that you want to bring to your theater. So we'll have those discussions. You ask the questions, and they're often very good questions. And I usually take those questions back to our marketing team or our production team so we can really boil down to what the show is going to be. And then really it's, like I said, putting the puzzle together. We have to make sure a show.
It's definitely a big puzzle.
It's a big puzzle. Oftentimes these shows can play a different market every night, and they have about 350 miles they can travel. So often, if you're seeing a show in Utica and the show ends, the loadout will start. They will load out the entire show. They can travel up to 350 miles down the road and be there at 8 a.m. the next morning to load it in somewhere else. I don't know how these crews do this. It is miraculous, but they do. They travel in a sleeper bus. So they load out a show and then they sleep on the bus and wake up at another theater and start it again. So it is our job to make sure that is as smooth as it can be. There's a joke that every once in a while they'll claim an agent are blindfolded and are throwing darts at a map, because sometimes while we would love to play markets that are all next to each other, a market that may make sense in that line has a conflict. So sometimes we'll have to circle back and come back and pick it up. So it's our job to really make sure we understand all the markets we are going to play and then line them up the best we can. So it's a lot of staring at maps, a lot of staring at schedules. That's the slightly non-glamorous side of what we do, but it's all important.
And then there's weather.
And then there's weather. We always say the thing in booking, and actually any live theater, you may feel the same. It's never the thing you think is going to go wrong. It's the thing over to the side that you weren't watching that all of a sudden comes out of nowhere, because that is the nature of live theater. You never know what's going to happen.
Right. And we had an issue, and I know this is a show that we worked on together, was Cats, was the size of the stairs. We were all ready to go and ready to run. And then, we did our walkthrough and realized, in the event of emergency, God forbid, we couldn't get people to get out of the theater fast enough because the pit was open and there were stairs and things like that. So that is like the quick moving things where on paper, everything looked great. And 4 hours before a show, we're doing our walkthrough and we're like, this is not going to fly. And, it's the things that you hope never happen, but you have to be prepared for. So that's always something in the back of my mind, is we're never really through a show until the last crew member leaves the theater to get on that tour bus that are parked so beautifully down Genesee Street that people can't wait to see on the show night. But we are completely responsible, and we feel that it's, owed to the union and the stagehands and the theater and every usher and volunteer is to make sure that show gets on the road safely, because it could be such a ripple effect if for some reason there's just one little hiccup. And I think the thing that people don't get to see that I wish more people could see is how organized loadout is. As well as it comes in, it goes out just as organized, labeled, marked, crates, boxes, because that show is opening up somewhere else in the next day or two and needs to come off the truck in the same way. So it's incredible what you guys do, and what your team does not go unnoticed here in Utica. And we are, forever thankful that you continue to bring back such high quality shows to our beautiful community in such a professional way, because like you said, this business is relationships. And when you're working with just such a strong organization and a team, it makes our job, a lot easier. So we know you go crazy day in and day out, and your job probably is never done till the tour is over. But
Right.
the 48 hours that you're here in Utica, we like to take care of you, and we appreciate everything that you do from a technical standpoint and stuff like that. But I wish people could experience that excitement at load-in, in the organization, at load-out, and just everything in between, because we almost breathe when the show is on stage. And I think to some people that is the nerve-wracking.
It's going.
Yeah.
Well, we often say that the better we are at our jobs, the easier it will look. It's almost like the more work that we're doing behind the scenes, if it looks seamless to everybody and it seems easy and smooth, we've done our job. And it's not to say that when there's something that comes up, someone hasn't done their job, because like I said, there's so many things out of our control. But what we do know is that with planning and proactivity and knowing all the things that could go wrong, we can almost ensure that they won't. So that's really, and it is happening. And oftentimes it's not seen. I really appreciate your recognition of that. I mean, and again, I think some of these crews go so sort of unheralded for that, because when they're very good, they're doing miraculous things. They can come in, and oftentimes we have these production managers that walk into a theater and have to reevaluate what they're doing in 2 minutes, because you've got 40, 50 people standing there ready to load a show in. And like you said, if there needs to be stairs need to be changed, or if there's something that they weren't expecting, that's why these guys are so good, because they can come in there and almost lose no time, even if they're completely changing what this huge group of people are about to do. So I'm with you. I think that those guys deserve a big round of applause for what they do.
Huge. All the way from Utica, we're cheering on. Yes, it's unbelievable. And like I keep saying, I wish there was like a special ticket just to stay late and witness that, because you get so much appreciation for live theater. I mean, you go to the show for the message and the marketing behind it and things like that. Maybe you're familiar, maybe you could tie it to a memory or something like that. But when you start to see it work from the ground up, you will go to that theater because you are committed to understanding the whole process. You have witnessed it, you've seen it. And for us, we just have such an appreciation for everything that everybody does, even within the theater, to the cast and crew and the traveling side of it. But it is like down to a science. I've witnessed, just due to weather, us not getting everything off the truck or thinking we're not going to, and stagehands have just worked so hard with head carpenters to make sure that truck is completely loaded to give every patron the experience they deserve. So we just had this question pop up, and I think it's appropriate for what we're talking about, and may put you on the spot a little, but if you could think of a production that was the largest traveling cast, and what was that production? So can you kind of think of some of your work that was such just a large cast and crew, I guess?
Right. I'm trying to think of, there's some sizable ones. I mean, oftentimes, Les Mis and Phantom are two that come to mind, because they are, it's oftentimes not just about the principals, but, when you have 40 people on stage, because 20 of those people are the chorus and are filling in, I'm sure anybody that's seen those shows, sort of 42nd Street is another one that you think of. Oftentimes, again, if they're doing it well, you don't necessarily realize all the people in the background doing little things. In some ways, there may be the same person almost always the same person can often play 2 or 3 roles. So, you may have the shopkeeper in one scene, maybe the father in another scene. And they look a little different, obviously, with costumes. I don't right now know exactly the biggest one, but yeah, I would think some of these first nationals that come out, just on a different scale, both cast wise, but you also oftentimes will see those shows back in the days when Phantom was rolling out in 21 trucks. I mean, sometimes when you think about that, and maybe this is our transition to coronavirus and how things may change.
21 trucks.
But yeah, I mean,
my heart skips a beat at 6.
In the heyday, to think about that, it would, some of these, take 3 and 4 days to load in. So what we talk about, typically a load in may take 8 hours. These shows were taking 3 and 4 days to load in, and Lion King is still, multi-day load in and load out. So, and it's interesting because sometimes people think bigger is better, which is, we've worked on enough shows that are beautiful. So, each show has its own personality and brings, different things to it. But it's always fun to see one of those spectacle shows that, there's so much going on. You can't even imagine that that it's not a permanent production.
So before we get into An Officer and a Gentleman, because you will be in Utica for an extended period of time and talk about the tech side of it, I want to touch base, like you just said, with the mega shows, the Disney and the Hamiltons of the world and all of that. I try to explain it to our patrons why maybe Utica can't always get those shows, but I think you more than anybody can explain to us what does a mega show mean, what goes into it, how does population and density and community and theater size take into place when booking a mega show, because year after year when we ask what do people want to see, just like every other theater, I'm sure we get all the same names, and it's just sometimes we can't be in that pool to pick from. So can you give us some insight into those mega shows and really what you're looking for in a theater and in a community when booking?
Sure. So first of all, let me say I want to see those shows too. So I get that when you have some of these shows that sort of transcend and become really a movement, I understand why that would be the show that you would want to see. It's interesting because most major markets that play full weeks, and let me just go back to say, so there's several types of touring productions out there. One way to kind of break it up is actors equity and equity productions and non-equity. And I think in some people's minds, there is a quality difference, and it's certainly not always the case. Sometimes it is, but I think oftentimes, one example I give is that for Rent, for example, when it went to Broadway, which was a huge deal, obviously its first time on Broadway, and the story with Jonathan Larson. I mean, if anyone remembers Rent, the cast was on the front of Time magazine. So just to give an indication of that modern day musical. All of the actors who many of them are names everyone now recognizes, Idina Menzel and Jesse Martin and Taye Diggs, were all non-equity actors, and they all got their equity cards on Rent going to Broadway. So they were young, scrappy kids, and it made it amazing. But none of them were equity actors until they stepped foot on that stage. And I only say that because oftentimes one thing that does come with union shows versus non-union is that there's just more, there's more rules, if you will, that they have to follow on the course.
Absolutely.
So a union show has to play an 8 performance minimum. So in that way, they're really only able to play markets that either have an 8 show subscription or just have a sizable enough market that are going to fill, if you have 2,500 seats, I'm going to do terrible at my math, but somewhere around 19,000 tickets that you want to that you're going to need to sell. And that is, no one wants to play to a half empty house, and most people don't want to see a show in a really, with very few people there. So some of it is about the size of the market and whether or not you can fill all those shows. Obviously, from your perspective, all of those shows, each one has a cost associated with it too. So, there's also, you need to be able to sell enough tickets to afford that show. For the megas, while most union shows will play 1 week, the megas will play 4, 5, 6 weeks. So now not only are we talking about 8 performances, you're talking about, 40, 45 performances and more that you will need to be able to fill. Now, arguably, Hamilton could probably do that in any market. But when a normal tour that's playing 1 week at each market, you might be able to get 50 weeks in that, 50 markets in that 1 year. When you're playing on, 4, 5, 6 weeks, you're not going to be able to play very many markets in a year. So it just takes time. So in that way, even if you could do a mega and play multiple weeks, it just takes a while to get there. I'll give you an example. I mean, living in Nashville, like I said, I'm a subscriber at Tennessee Performing Arts Center. So I also have a unique perspective that I'm a subscriber to my local theater as well. And we had a past it's been out there. It played Memphis before it got here. It played Atlanta before it got here. Obviously, it was in Chicago, and so we patiently waited. And it wasn't because, it obviously sold out the second it got here. But the reality is that even with 3 tours running, that's just the soonest they could come. So it's not that they sit there and say, well, we're not going to play Utica. But, there's sort of a line.
We're going to get there.
You'll get there.
We're going to get there. We are fully committed to, in the next couple of years, it's one of our long-term goals to be a mega city, even if it means once every 5 years and it's the risk we take, but I think everybody that we work with knows that that's our ultimate end goal, is to be a city that can play everything eventually. And,
Yeah. And I think that is, like I said, sometimes it takes a little patience, and you want to do it so that and I'll tell you, I said this to friends of mine here in Nashville, because I'm a big advocate for being a subscriber. There's so many benefits to it. And it's interesting. This is a little behind the scenes. I had to say to my friends here, you want to know why Hamilton went to Memphis and why it went to Atlanta and why it went to Charlotte and Durham before it came to Nashville. Well, those markets might have 18,000, 20,000 subscribers, and Nashville had something like 7,000. And this is something that producers look at to see how many subscribers does a market have that we know will be going in to play to before they sell ads. So, that was a real eye-opener for people in our market, just because I would say to people that I know, are you a subscriber? And oftentimes the response was, well, I've been meaning to, I just haven't gotten there. And I want to be, I need to do that. And so just so that, just to know that is something that producers look at when when they look to see what markets they're going to play in the first few years. So to everyone, tell your friends, now's the time, because we need bigger shows. So
yeah, so if you want bigger shows, Utica, do your justice. Call, get on the wait list to become a subscriber. Just continue to renew your subscription. But yeah, definitely. I think that we try to advocate that. It's an educational piece. By having you even on today, you're giving so much insight to our audience and our patrons. So they will continue to support us, and we'll get new supporters out of it. But yeah, it's an educational thing. It's a numbers thing. There's a whole lot of pieces to the puzzle. But I wanted to
play everywhere. So yeah, so just know it is, but it is, as you said, it's not for lack of you guys expressing interest or us knowing that, the audience is there for it. Sometimes it's just takes a little while to get there.
Absolutely. And we're going to get there, and we're fully committed, and all our patrons are so wonderful. So they keep helping us push the bar a little bit higher time after time. So I want to get quickly into Officer and a Gentleman. We have some questions around the tech standpoint. What does that mean? What does a tech show look like from the ground up? We had somebody ask, what does the casting process look like? And then maybe what is the time frame for that? What comes first? where do you start? Because with a tour, it seems to be backwards based on cities and longevity and how far the tour goes. But what does it look like from a show standpoint? I guess would be the question.
For a show like Officer, which is really starting from the ground up, what they'll do is first they will hold auditions to do readings. And this oftentimes will start, there's oftentimes actors that will be hired for a reading show that will be, which is the actor you will see that eventually lands on Broadway in that same role. And there's other actors that will kind of feel as the show morphs and changes, they may realize they need another actor to bring something different to the role. So what they typically do is, I would say for Officer, this probably started, I have a hard time remembering what day it is. Okay, so it probably started this fall where they held an audition and they put it in Backstage and they put it and for the auditions. And they'll oftentimes also, if a producer, in this case the production company is called Workforce Productions, which Danielle very well. Steve Gabriel is the executive producer and he's well loved. Yes. And he does great work.
He's wonderful.
Often, an actor that he may have worked with in another show that he just knows that he's got them in mind for this role. So he may call in certain specific actors to come audition, but oftentimes it's open auditions. And so what they'll do is they'll cast the reading and they'll have several readings where they're either reading the script, and the script is constantly changing. But Dick Scanlon, who is a big Broadway name, he wrote Thoroughly Modern Millie, and he's done a lot of work on a lot of shows on Broadway as far as helping with the script and directing. So he's writing and directing this show. So he's been consistently tweaking the script. And so the actors will get together and do another read through. It was great. We had our first Zoom read through that was the entire show with all the actors playing the roles. And it was fantastic. And I've never experienced something like that you could feel it jumping out of the screen just hearing them read it, which it gave me chills because you could see how it was coming together and how great this show was going to be.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Really quickly, I saw you of Gentlemen in New York with you back in January and Kristen in our office, and it was short and simple and sweet. Tears, goosebumps, I mean, the whole nine. So I would have loved to have been on that Zoom call, Mollie. You could have snuck us in a little pass.
I'll see if there's a
video. But keep going. It was just wonderful.
So they're continuing to do that. And so what will happen is then right now it's funny because, trying to figure out when New York's going to open up to be able to have rehearsal spaces. And what's interesting is that there's a lot of shows sitting on the starting line ready for the gun to go off. And once it does, there's going to be this rush of shows re-auditioning and rehearsing. And, it's one of those things that even Steve was saying, we've got to get rehearsal space because once we can open up and do this, there's going to be a lot of shows needing that exact thing. So they will come in to the studio sometime this fall and really start the blocking process and the rehearsing in the rehearsal space. So then what they'll do is about 2.5 weeks before the show opens in Utica, the actors will get to Utica and the crew gets there and they start loading in the show and the actors will be on stage. And that's really, those 2.5 weeks are so important because it truly is where the show, for the first time, we say it gets on its feet. It is up. The actors, it is truly where the show take the form. And it's an amazing experience because these people are there. I mean, it's 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. all the way through. And then there's notes every day. And then they come back the next day and do it all over again. And it's so interesting, like you said, to watch all these pieces because while you've got the actors tweaking the performances and rehearsing the choreography, you at the same time have the lighting director and the set designer. They're on hand also tweaking their side. So it just is coming together all at the same time. And it kind of seems like you do all this work, like I said, we do it for 2 years before this happens. but really there's nothing, you can only do so much until the lights come on and, until all the pieces come together, which is why that tech time is so important. And, finding a great partner that we can come into a theater that feels like a very welcoming space, that's really generous with allowing our actors and our company to feel that they have a place to build this is so important. That's why we love to come to Utica. But we're so excited that is what will happen in January, and we'll December into January when Officer and Gentleman text in Utica.
We cannot wait. I know the Stanley Theater is so excited to welcome you. The Broadway Theater League of Utica is so ready for you to get up here and enjoy this cold weather with us. And we can't wait to meet the cast and crew and everything like that. So I know we covered quite a bit today. Did we leave anything out that you could think of?
Well, I feel like we could just do this for hours. I feel like I want to.
We can.
Going. No plan of everything that happens.
So yeah, we can just keep going. I'm in no rush. We have no agenda. I know your kids that I got to see previously before hopping on are probably ready for mom to get back to them. But really quick, I think the one question on everybody's mind, and we always love to ask this because right now we're working on the 2022 season, 21 into 22, and we've been working on some things, but I feel like you have all the information. So tell us, both from a touring standpoint and a Broadway standpoint, what are you most excited to see come out? Can you give us any hints of what you think what will be out, or maybe what Utica has a chance for, just so I can stone you for the next year to get them here?
Well, it's interesting because right now, with Broadway being closed, there were a number of shows that were scheduled to open on Broadway that have been pushed for an entire year. So, or maybe opened and were open for a few days and then were forced to close. So the good news is that those shows are going to come back. They are scheduled to reopen as soon as we can. I'll just kind of run through some of the highlights for me, as far as what was on Broadway, was scheduled to open or just opened. Girl from the North Country is a beautiful show. It's one of our quiet ones that we talk about. It's the music of Bob Dylan, reorchestrated, set in, the Dust Bowl of Midwest. It's Duluth, actually, that it happens. Really thought-provoking, and especially everything that's happened in 2020. I feel like there's so many layers. It will break your heart. It will lift you up. It's a wonderful one. And then that would tour in 22, 23. So like I said, there's that minute that it takes to get out. Another one is Company. This is sort of Sondheim like you've never seen it. The lead character is reimagined as a woman. And so kind of think of Carrie Bradshaw and Sex and the City, as Company. And I find it ironic that a show about people getting together in a time following a time when we've all had to be apart. I think it's such a happy show about community and being together and who lifts you up in your life. Then you have your classics. I mean, we have Jesus Christ Superstar out right now on the Equity Tour, which, again, everything's going to get pushed, but the hope is that will be able to go down and do splits in the 2022 spring of 22. So that's one that we hope we can absolutely bring to Utica. We've got Annie. I mean, the sun will come out tomorrow. Is there more of a time?
That's your bottom dollar. I know.
Yeah, so the little redhead that everyone loves will be out in 21, 22. So I hopefully we can find a time to bring that to Utica as well. And then there's some really fun ones that are coming out. I mean, just things that I was thinking about before we got to talk was, there's a show called Six that was scheduled to open on Broadway. It's sort of like the Wives of Henry VIII reimagined as the Spice Girls. It is so fun and so clever. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is as my children have grown up, they have started to listen to the cast recordings. And I have a 12-year-old daughter who has had 6 on repeat. So it's kind of one of these, your kids will love it, you will love it. And then one other show to note, a show that is actually making its North American debut in Toronto in the fall of 21. It's supposed to, and then would hopefully go into Broadway, is a show called Anne Juliet, which this is another one. This imagines if in the story of Romeo and Juliet, if Juliet hadn't killed herself or hadn't died, because she couldn't be with Romeo, and goes on to live her best life. And it is all the music. It's set to the music of Max Martin, who produced Britney Spears and Backstreet Boys and Katy Perry. And it's all the pop songs that you know. But again, it's empowering. It's great. So there's so many wonderful shows on the horizon, so many different types of shows, both your classics, but also brand new ones that I think, even given where we are in the world, will just offer a whole new perspective. I mean, that's the thing that I think those of us that are in the arts are so ready to get back.
Absolutely, 100%.
We miss that. And I think it's going to be phenomenal when we get to tell these stories again, because I think we all need it very badly.
Yeah. Now more than ever, we have to continue with strong, powerful messages. Acceptance. Broadway will and always forever will be a place of acceptance where everybody's welcomed. And here at the Broadway Theater League of Utica, we can't reiterate that enough. And we stand and support, obviously, everybody. And in a time like this, we can use it. We need these powerful messages to come back onto the stage. And it is our job, to educate everybody in the importance of this. So, Mollie, thank you. We will be welcoming you back soon, and we will see you this winter.
Perfect.
I know everybody enjoyed this segment. Thank you for, sharing in this and being the educational tool that Utica needed for some insight and giving us a peek into your world that we only get to see a few times a year. So we're forever thankful that you took this Thursday afternoon with us. And I think we covered a lot. A quick thank you again to our youth ambassadors that are graduating this year. We're thinking of you all. If you want to become a youth ambassador here with Broadway Utica, just go to broadwayutica.org and fill out the application. It's for all that have a passion for the arts, the community, people, and live theater. We are here for you. You are our next generation of theater goers, and we want to welcome you with open arms into our community. Subscribers, be on the lookout for your invoices and your renewals. New subscribers, save your spot in line. Bank of Utica, thank you always for being a constant supporter of the arts. And once again, Miss Mollie Mann, all the way from Tennessee, for sharing in this Thursday with us. And I can't thank her enough. I know I probably sound like a broken record, but even 100 thank yous is never enough for all that she does for us. She is such a staple to our organization, and we are so honored to share her with you all today. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.